Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of In the Field on the Reserve Pool Network. I'm your host, Necromanticer, and joining me today is the man himself from the Transition Zone. That would be Isaac. How are we doing today, Isaac?
I'm good, sir. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. We've got two really interesting teams facing off here with Dylan on the right-hand side piloting Gold Leader. As you can see, a very heavy yellow theme, though there's a bit of color palette issues with some of the characters. And on our left-hand side, we have Patrick himself from the prep area. Oh, goodness, this team is really interesting. We've got Quantum Loop Mark 1. There will be improvements, but right now it's just a very science-focused team with a lot of interesting characters on it.
Yeah, this is his work in progress for TPA this week. I'm interested to see how this plays out and what changes will be made in the future here.
Oh, most definitely. What do you think are the main characters we're going to be looking at coming out of Quantum Loop Mark 1?
Well, I think on Shadow Melt's team there we have some strong, obviously, tech cards when we look at what Too Cool for Words does, what Red Dragon does, and we know what those cards will provide us. But I'm really interested to see how the other action cards are that he brings, both the Lantern Ring and the Millennium Rod.
Oh, most definitely. I'm really curious as to how exactly he wants to... we're holding up, apparently. Guys want to unmute yourselves?
That's what we're doing, yeah. As you can see on the actual stream, he's pulling die, but there's nothing showing up, so I got to sync real quick.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, I moved it over. I saw that. Yeah. I wondered why he hadn't started yet.
Yeah. Apparently I'm not synced either. So who are we syncing to? Shadow Meld?
Shadow Meld, yeah.
Let's do that.
I think it's Mach 1 and not Mark 1.
Yeah. I don't know if it matters.
Mach 1 refers to speed, doesn't it? Mark 1 refers to iterations?
Correct. And so Mark 1 is better. And
yeah.
What do I care? You guys added it.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's
all right. So apparently,
Necro said Mark 1, so damn, that's what it is.
Yeah, it was like Mach 1's just the speed of sound in a given medium.
All right, here we go.
Mark 1 is like when you're making Mark 1, 2, 3, etc. It's just abbreviated MK period.
All right, let me see if I can actually see your dice. Loading.
I see him.
You're gonna have to replay. Give me 2 seconds. My screen's being
loud. Getting a little wonky with the white space there, but it's catching up. See if we can move things around. Or were you having issues like this last time you set up a?
Well, the problem is when I switch screens. When I switch between two screens, it causes like a jolt for some reason in the recording.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because so if I go like over to this monitor sometimes, like the actual Google Hangout, sometimes it will give it issues, but we should be okay. So anyways, you guys were at the point where Patrick was starting. You had just talked to Isaac. I think you were saying Iceman, Red Dragon. You were about to talk about tech cards. So
yeah, we were just introducing the broad spectrum of characters. So we want to pick it up right there. Isaac, take us whenever you're ready, and both of you two mute.
You want me to just reiterate what I said about the ring and the rod?
Yeah, start wherever you think is good, because, again, we can edit it back together in post.
Okay. So I'm really interested to see how he uses the Lantern Ring and the Millennium Rod together, both action dice. And that new Lantern Ring out of Warlight, I like it. I like this rare, the limited only by imagination. Should be a fun one to see him get used.
Oh, most definitely. And what's really interesting for me to see is putting that on a team with kobolds. That's going to make this a very heavy energy-reliant team. The idea is to have as much energy available in his reserve pool when he's swinging in with his characters. And with a character like Cable, oh goodness, that is just going to be absolutely devastating. But we'll get more on that later. Let's have a look-see at Gold Leader and see what's going to be coming out of Dylan's side.
And we saw here Patrick did take his first turn one. He bought a Kobold and a Jade, the Jennifer Lynn Hayden die.
It's always nice to pick up those early kobolds. The faster you can get them on the field, the faster they can swarm and give you all those extra dice and energy, which is going to be really important. But again, Gold Leader is waiting for us.
So on the gold leader team that Dylan is fielding, I have had a chance to play this a few times against him. He is pretty strong with the control, the Millennium Puzzle, the Wasp Global, the Loki common from the Age of Ultron set. He's got ways, and obviously with the super rare Constantine, ways to slow down what his opponent wants to do.
I'm definitely seeing that, and with Constantine and Lissa Drac on the same team, that feels kind of like overkill, but it feels like the best kind of overkill. The kind where you just really hammer your opponent home. Like, you are not going to be fielding this specific character, and against some teams that would be a perfect combo, but considering that we've got actually like 3 or 4 or 5 maybe even characters that Patrick is going to be wanting to put on the field, I'm dubious as to whether or not that's going to be a wise investment. At the very least, he can sort of stall out kobolds or at least punish with Lissa Drac, making his opponent pay for them, at least to get them in the field to start with. But after that, he's kind of just got to guess which characters are going to be coming out. He knows Jade has to be down for St. Walker to do anything, but maybe it's not even going to be necessary. So we're just going to have to wait and see what he decides to do with his energy going forward from here.
Absolutely. I'd agree. I like Lissa Drac, but yeah, the 2-life thing may not come into enough of a concern for Patrick. They need to worry about it.
I mean, we mentioned control, and there it is. We see that vulnerability being picked up, and alongside either the Wasp Global or the eventual Loki ability, that's going to be pretty much targeted removal time and again throughout the game, adding a little bit of prep and a little bit of clearing the field. And while it's not going to be super effective against a character like Jade, who is totally fine with being knocked out, it's still going to be nasty, especially if he can use it at the right time against certain characters like Cable, who cost a little bit to get and keep on the field. But oof, perfect rolls too.
Absolutely.
Rather stunning.
And on that last turn, Dylan was able to use Patrick's Red Dragon Global and get the first point of damage when he purchased that vulnerability.
Red Dragon Global looks like it's going to be pretty popular in this matchup. Lantern Ring, probably going to be a purchase somewhere along the line. That Millennium Puzzle looks tasty. And with so many kobolds in the field without any sort of protection, I would be shocked to see that Cone of Cold stay on the card for the entire game. We're at least going to see one die purchased eventually. I almost guarantee it. But we're going to have to wait for our players to decide when they want to pick that up, and it's really going to do great things for keeping kobolds off the field and keep them from swarming at the right time. So,
absolutely. We just saw Patrick purchase his second St. Walker die, and looks like he's sitting tight with both his Jade, Kobold, and a couple sidekicks in the field.
His field is pretty nasty in comparison to the single sidekick out on the right-hand side for Dylan, but that's really not the important part of his team. He wants to get that Lantern Ring, and he just hasn't rolled the right energy at the right time. But once he picks that up, that Kobold swarming in is going to deal a lot of damage, either attacking with St. Walker himself or a Kobold, depending. And the real nasty combo is going to come in when Cable gets out there, swings in, dealing damage with both bolts and fists for that Lantern Ring, as well as being able to pay bolts and use either of the Pump Global on Invulnerability or Cone of Cold to deal direct damage, just hammering home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Absolutely. The Invulnerability Global, along with that Cone of Cold, paying the fist for the block character, Cable having his special ability that when he's blocked, being able to pay those bolts to still have him deal damage as though you're blocked. That's quite a combination of damage for Cable to be coming in and striking the opponent with, in this case, in Dylan's face.
It's actually really funny to me to see some of the more meta options just being completely forgone here. That Wolverine's probably going to sit on his card the entire game because even though we have the Relentless Wolverine combo available, there's just going to be too many characters coming out and sitting on the field for Dylan, especially since this isn't a PXG game. And so getting those sidekicks out's a big deal. It might actually come to fruition eventually should Black Canary be purchased and played out, but it's just weird to see characters like that being brought to the table and completely forgone. Even the kobolds, I amend that. We just saw all those kobolds picked up and a Lantern Ring with the Red Dragon Global, so ouch.
Yeah, that was a big turn there for Patrick, purchasing the other 3 kobolds along with that Lantern Ring, and he's only got 1 die in that bag, so there's gonna be some characters coming out here real soon.
Hopefully he can set up the swarm for later. But the other really interesting thing that I notice about both of these teams is neither of them are bringing any of the more reasonable counter cards that have been released over the course of the sets. Like there's no Human Paladin, there's no Captain America, there's no even Ring of Magnetism on the field. Like it's strange to see how much both teams are focusing on just going aggro, building up their own offenses as opposed to kind of trying to accommodate for their opponent's strategies.
Well, and Dylan, in a way, has that with Loki, right? With trying to get the targeted kind of Loki spray there, playing the bull, and obviously Constantine to slow down a card for it to win fielded effect. But yeah, it seems like that Paladin, Captain, Wonder Girl, Ring combo, like I feel like at least one of those needs to be on a team, but both these guys are going kind of just full blast here and not worried about that.
Yeah, it is weird, especially on a control team that's got something like Loki and Wasp, that you wouldn't see at least some sort of stalling counter card, but I suppose he just really wants to hit home and hit fast, and he might be able to pull that off, but he's going to need an interesting setup of characters for that. I'm not particularly seeing any explicit win condition coming out of his side like I am with Patrick, since Patrick has the Lantern Ring, the Cable ability, and just a ton of attackers hitting in. Out of Dylan's side, we mostly have Wolverine, but again, we're going to need to see Black Canary. Oh, and that is the Wolverine, but without Black Canary, it's going to be difficult to squeeze that through all the wall of sidekicks, so we're going to have to see some interesting plays coming out of his team in order to make that work.
Yeah, I would have imagined at this point, or maybe next turn, that he's going to be looking to buy a Black Canary. Oh, and he's attacking with a Kobold here.
And it's nice to get him off the field, put him back in the bag, give you that swarm for later. So
yep.
I understand the sentiment there, and it's going to work out. At least he gets to re-roll him for energy next turn.
Absolutely.
Something really interesting about this matchup that you just don't see very often is both Millennium items from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Set being brought to bear. Now, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Millennium Puzzle at this point, just kind of acting as removal, waiting in the eaves, but Millennium Rod is a very interesting inclusion for Patrick here. The idea behind it, I believe, is to give him access to another character's version of energy, since he only is bringing Bolt and Fist characters to the table. So if he rolls masks or shields with a lot of sidekicks, at least he can use the Millennium Rod to steal over a mask or shield character in order to make use of those Lantern Ring energy procs for just more burn damage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of that versatility of the ring is just awesome, and the rod, like you said, gives him that opportunity to take one of Dylan's beat sticks if he has one, and just send it swinging back at him.
I'm very interested to see where these next turns go, because we have a Lantern Ring in the bag and 3 Kobolds waiting in the eaves on Patrick's side, so we're going to see a lot of swarming out of both players, actually. And if we can get an early Lantern Ring proc on a single St. Walker swinging in, that's going to be a ton of damage for Dylan to contend with.
Absolutely. And like you said, he has no way to kind of adjust that. He has no way to counter the damage that he's taking from that ring. So he's just got to be ready for it, and he's got to have a quick answer here.
Mm-hmm. It would have been nice to be able to save that shield with the Human Paladin Global, but since it's not an option here, we're just going to have to see him weather the storm the old-fashioned way, probably take a little bit of a hit to the chin. The question is he going to... Who is he going to target with Alyssa Drac? The only character that's coming out of the bag here for Dylan is going to be Kobolds, and since you don't really want those fielded in the first place, the ability is probably going to go to waste. May not have been the best purchase in the first place.
Well, he's got, one more St. Walker coming out of that bag? No, he only bought the 2. That's correct. He's just got the 1. It's going to used pile, so... Yeah, Kobolds are about it. So.
Oh, lordy. I'm also just starting to think to myself how difficult it's going to be to keep track of his field once he starts fielding a lot of those yellow characters. Yeah. They already kind of blend in together, and as we see more and more of them, we're going to need to rely heavily on just actually focusing in on those icons and stats rather than just kind of glancing at the color like you can normally pull off.
Well, it's nice to see in this matchup here a week and a half or so into our newest War of Light set that we've already got, one, two, three, four new cards with three different lantern colors involved in this game.
Most definitely. It's always cool to see the kind of matches that people get up to on Vassal, testing out games, testing out teams, testing out strategies, seeing what works so that they can bring that to their local play shop and pull off something really unexpected. And it is cool to take a look and see characters that you're just not going to see most of the time. Like, no one's going to bring Millennium Rod just off the wall without having tried it out, and Vassal kind of provides a platform for that. So I'm really glad that we have this system in place. Like there's vulnerability, there's cable, there's, like I said, Millennium Rod. You just don't see these things. Black Canary even. Like, when was the last time you saw someone play that?
Yeah, I saw one team at Worlds with the Super Rare Black Canary do successful with it, but besides that, nobody's bringing it to a constructed event. And unless you have that person you can play with at your kitchen table consistently, I still think this is the best way to practice. Last night, Dylan and I played until way too late at night, just playing around some constructed teams, and we had some ideas, and we were flipping cards on off the team, and we probably got in a solid 8-9 games, over the course of the hours that we were playing. And it gives you that opportunity to say, okay, how are we going to advance this? How are we going to adjust this? And like you said, some of these cards, Cable being a great example, this is how he's going to find out if it works.
Oh, most definitely. And just going back to something you said in the beginning there, I've always thought that the super rare Black Canary was really worthwhile for her stats and her ability, and I think that you just mentioning that someone actually brought that to Worlds and did mildly successful felt like a real bit of vindication on my end, so I just appreciate hearing that from you.
Well, the team, so that was Truby ran that team, and he ran the modified, not modified, I mean, it was his baby, it was his Swarm team, where he ran Kobolds, he ran Sturge, and he had that Black Canary as his as one of his powerhouses on that team. And he bought it and he played with it.
Ooh, look at that. He was originally planning to pick up Cable, but instead the Millennium Rod. Oh, I feel like these are the moments that I live for, just seeing these off-the-wall combos that you just don't see. I want that Millennium Rod to be the difference. And if he can steal a Wolverine with that, that could be devastating.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what he's got his eye on. I mean, Wolverine's coming in with the fist. He's going with this hard fist mechanic with the lantern ring if he can get it out there. And boy, Dylan's got to think he's got to field this Wolverine, but it could be stolen away from him. Potentially even this next turn, he could pull a small chance, but he could pull that Rod out with 3 dice in his bag currently.
And one of them's a Kobold, so he's getting that free Swarm proc. So yep. You've got 2 of the dice from his non-Kobold dice from used being tossed into his roll as well. If he draws into those Kobolds, they're going to swarm. Unless we see that Kobold being removed here, and with the energy available for Dylan's side, that is entirely possible. The question is it worth it? And he looks like he's going to take it.
Yeah, it looks like Dylan decided to re-roll that Wolverine and not give him a weapon to hit him back in the face with.
Which I can totally appreciate, especially since it gave him the energy needed to take out that Kobold and stop the almost imminent swarm. So very good timing on that. That's kind of what Wasp can allow you to do. It's not necessarily heavy control, but at least now he can name that character, the Kobold with Lysidrak, get some free burn-off since he knows that Patrick wants to field it. And so that's kind of what he wants to be doing here, is knocking his opponent's characters off the field and making sure he's taking damage for them. Maybe pick up a Wasp sometime.
So on Patrick's Mark I team here, the Quantum Loop, Jade is in the field and has been in the field, sitting there primarily for what use, do you think?
2 reasons. One, cheap Bolt character gives him an option if he can't pick up a Cable in time, so he can always just have that there. But the other reason is to provide a Green Lantern for St. Walker to be available. Otherwise, he'd have to use his sidekicks, since St. Walker does have pretty reasonable stats, going in at a 1, 3, or 5 damage. He needs that Green Lantern in order to make use of it. And picking up the 2-cost St. Walker as opposed to the 3-cost is almost definitely worth it from his perspective.
Absolutely. And so the Lantern Ring would also provide him that ability, correct, for the Green Lantern die, since that Lantern Ring is a
You are correct.
Green Lantern affiliated.
I'm always questioning what they mean in the War of Light set when they list a lantern color, because some of them specifically declare lantern-colored characters and some don't, so I always have to double guess. And I suppose, yes, the lantern ring itself would allow St. Walker to swing in unimpeded.
Now, the interesting thing when we look at kind of like what you said, you mentioned that, I think that's where, for those that are getting used to War of Light, it's going to take some time to study that up. You need to pay attention to what the different lantern colors are. You need to be able to identify the symbols without their color. We ran into that at one of our drafts where I think it was Mogo who used green and blue lanterns from used to prep area, and the player playing it was certain that it was green and yellow. And from a thematic sense, that made no sense.
That would not work.
And when we kind of said, look, you have to look at the mechanics of this color, or of the shape, the color's not always going to be there. So just kind of as a word of warning for those playing War of Light, be familiar with your lantern shapes.
Definitely, and we just saw a really tricky combo coming out here in that Patrick initially tried to cable global his opposing Kobold into blocking when he decided to swing with St. Walker, but there was a failure to pass priority, and instead what we saw was Dylan using Relentless on his own Kobold, keeping it nice and safe and in the field for another turn.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even though the 2 damage is going to come out from that lantern ring with St. Walker swinging in.
Yeah, so he's able to keep that swarm, which is,
Sadly, that's kind of one of the options available. Once you use that Cable Global that's already dealt 1 damage, using a Wasp Global to follow it up is going to kill it off entirely.
Yep, so there goes his opportunity to swarm there.
It's kind of sad, especially because we can clearly see Kobold Die is in the bag presently, but it happens. We're definitely seeing a lot of anti-Kobold shenanigans out of both players, and that's what I like to see, because the Kobold is such a strong character for giving you so much energy. Having the ability to just kind of knock it back and forth is really important.
Well, absolutely, and that's where we see the experience play with both of these guys to go, well, this little 1/1 or 1/2 character, seemingly useless, seemingly, I could just ignore that. When we play with 2 experienced players like these guys are, they know what has to be done as they're looking 2-3 steps ahead in their match.
And beyond that, I'm finding it really interesting to see that both Millennium artifacts have been picked up. They are both in the bag for either player, and they're going to be coming out in these next 2 or 3 turns and really causing havoc on the field. We have the Lantern Ring set up on the left-hand side with Patrick's Quantum Loop team, but we also have the Lysidrak and the heavy control elements on Dylan's side up and running. So it's going to kind of be a race to the bottom, see who can get their strategy to actually work first. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and we see that Dylan here has used the marker, and he has pretty much named Kobold, as he should, for Lysidrak every turn here, knocking out that single Kobold, making Patrick have to pay 2 life if he wants to get one back out in the field to swarm in the future.
And vulnerability also offering in that little bit of prep. It's kind of painful since it pulled a Kobold out of his bag, meaning that that's 1 less swarm proc he gets. So it's basically wasting the prep, but it's still just extra dice. You're never going to complain about that, and it kind of removes a little bit of the guessing RNG about what you're actually going to pull out of your dice the next turn. He's got a little bit of energy left over, but he can't Wasp Global, so now it's just him deciding what to do for the last little bit of his turn.
And it looks like he's passing the turn.
Didn't want to pick up that Constantine. He's willing to just let the turn play out and see what Patrick can put on the board. Ooh.
And there's our Millennium Rod.
And while it does roll energy, that's not actually an awful idea. That is going to be 2 free damage out of that Lantern Ring, and you can also use it for Wasp Globals on your on the opponent's turn, since it's just free energy.
Absolutely. That is a lot of fist.
Let's see, that's going to be a minimum of 4 damage coming out if he decides to swing in with his Saint Walker. Sadly, that Kobold did not make it to the field, but these things happen.
And he's passing priority.
Making sure to pass priority this time since they had issues with that last turn. So.
Well, it's these seasoned players.
Mm-hmm. We do see the Wasp Global coming out just for some chip damage. He had the energy in line, and now we're going to be seeing 4 damage coming back to the other side via that Lantern Ring. Oh, I'm just imagining how different this game would play out if there was a human Paladin on the field, since that Shield Global would be getting used left and right.
Absolutely. I can't imagine that is not a staple for a lot of teams moving forward. Unless you have the Lantern Ring, it would probably not be in your best interest to bring it for your opponent.
And there we see him adding the Wasp Global on top of it all. Insult to injury, since he knows he's got that 4 spare fist energy waiting around. He is getting double blocked on Saint Walker. Triple block even, so he's making sure Saint Walker is going down, but he had to declare blockers before globals were declared, so we need to back that up a sec. Instead, we see him using the Wasp Global on Lissa Drac to make sure that his Saint Walker survives and is ready to bash in for another turn, meaning he's taking out at one of the sidekicks and one of the Lissa Dracs.
So if you're sitting there as Dylan with your couple of characters, do you block Saint Walker at that point, or do you just let him through it and go over to you?
I let him through. I clutter my opponent's bag. He has no buffs. That's one shield character off the field. Honestly, if I'm him, I pick up Black Canary and really prey on that Wolverine, because Wolverine can do upwards of 10, 12 damage swinging in alone, and all you need to do is field that Black Canary and you are set.
Yeah, well, and as many sidekicks as he's got out there, between the Black Canary, one mass to take care of the 1 or 2 characters that he's got using Relentless, and suddenly, yeah, that Wolverine smack him pretty hard.
Bingo. And that's the really nasty combo about it all. They're just hatching out exactly how that combat phase worked out, making sure that everything's on the up and up, and we have got it settled, so now it's moving back on over to Dylan's turn, and while he still has a Kobold in the field, he doesn't draw into any Kobold dice, so no swarming for him.
And there is our Millennium Puzzle. I assume he's going to keep that. Oh, no, he re-rolled it. Oh, no, he just fielded it, pulled it out of the bag, correct?
Yes, that was simply withdraw. That's why I was on its level 1 face. But I'm really interested to see if he picks up that Black Canary, maybe goes for a Wasp, but he doesn't have the right energy for it. He's got a lot of masks, but not quite enough to swing in with anything. So he's probably going to have a pretty hefty reroll here. See what he pulls out. Oh, no dice. Sadly, he only manages to refield that single Lissa Drac, but that gives him a ton of energy to make big purchases this turn if he really wants it. Sadly, he can't pick up Loki or Wasp, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have other characters that couldn't be useful for him.
Yeah, he's looking at possibly a Canary and Lissa here. He's short on bolts, so he's not picking up Wasp. You could pick up a Constantine. It seems like it's not the time for Constantine. Oh, there's your Black Canary.
With that Wolverine available, it's going to give him something to actually deal the lethal damage that he needs to, because right now he's kind of taking a beating from that Lantern Ring, and the only recourse he has is a little bit of chip damage from Lissa Drac. But if he can swing in on a level 3 Wolverine and get that in for damage with a Black Canary plus double Relentless, that's going to even the score by a lot and put the game at a very close position where you could win the game just by Wasp Globals from there. So it's still anybody's game to win or lose at this point.
And it looks like refielding Lissa Drac, he has this turn named Saint Walker as the character that will cost Patrick 2 life if he decides to field that character die.
That's an interesting choice. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but that's his prerogative. He gets to place it on whoever he wants. I know that we're seeing at least one Kobold come in, so I think that's who he should be declaring, since he doesn't want his opponent swarming those Kobolds for those fist energies for the Lantern Ring. But it's that's the game we're playing right now.
Absolutely.
Oh, Christ.
Yikes.
Well, that's 7, 8, 9 free damage after the double Wasp Global. He doesn't even care if his St. Walker goes down in this attack. That's going to be really, really difficult for
he can hit for
Dylan
8.
to weather. Yeah. And considering his blockers, we actually have lethal on the board if he decides to swing in with everything. It's just a matter of whether or not he wants to actually take it.
Yeah,
we do see a double mask coming out. I believe that's a Wasp Global taking
correct.
down one of those sidekicks, still leaving 7 attackers and 3 defenders, meaning that at least 3 attackers go through. And with the 7 damage from the fists coming out, that is still lethal. We have GG. Dylan has lost. Patrick has taken him out with that incredible amount of energy on that lantern ring. What an incredible play.
Absolutely. I mean, you just cannot leave that lantern ring out there and ignore it with no opportunity for action dice removal. It was just a ticking clock for him.
Mm-hmm. Especially with that heavy energy focus, those kobolds, the little St. Walkers here and there, that was just a nasty, nasty combo. And while the Lissa Drac wasn't necessarily going to be a game changer, I was really hoping that it would do a little bit more chip damage and put him in range of that Wolverine swing that I was hoping for, but it just never came to fruition in time.
Yeah, it was a good game. It was very well matched up. I think Patrick definitely had the team that had a plan, and he executed it very, very well.
No, I'm definitely impressed by both players. I really liked seeing both the Millennium Puzzles brought onto the field, but enough of that. Let's talk with our players and kind of see what we had going on and what was going through their heads at the time.
Absolutely.
Patrick, you there?
I am. Hey, what's up?
Well, we just saw a really interesting match with a lot of cards that we just were not expecting to see, a lot of new cards, and I really want to hear what was your thought process when making your new Quantum Leap Mark I team?
So I really wanted to use the cable that I, recently acquired during a Rainbow Draft weekend. Little humble brag there, or not so humble brag, whatever.
Yeah, not so humble brag.
But yeah, no. I mean, I wanted to put him on a team. I think last week I put Joker on a team and didn't really highlight that it was the Rainbow Draft Weekend Joker, but he's on the Dead Man, the Wonder Dead team. But no, I wanted to make Cable work because I looked at him and I'm like, wow, that's a really good ability on a relatively quality die. Like at least a relatively I can pay for it and not feel like I overpaid that much because the ability is so good. The problem is it's just an expensive ability to trigger. But if you look at it from the perspective of I only need to do it once to close out the game, then he's a really solid card if you combo it with Cone of Cold. And as RJ will tell you, Cone of Cold is one of my favorites.
Oh, Cone of Cold works everywhere.
And then the Lantern Ring, I wanted to play the Lantern Ring with the most constrained wording I possibly could. And so, the way I play it, because a lot of people are arguing how to play it, the way I play it is I only do as much damage as I have in my reserve pool if that character attacks. So if I had 2 fist characters, I wouldn't do twice what I had, right? So on that last turn, if I was attacking with 2 fist characters, I wouldn't do 14 damage with the ring. I could only at most do 7. And so that's why I wanted to build this team and show that, hey, with just a little bit of Kobold Love, something like St. Walker combos really well with the ring to just punch in for lethal. I know a lot of people are trying to use Guy Gardner. I think St. Walker does it better because he sticks around a little longer and he doesn't attack unless the ring is on the board. So that to me, I only have to worry about losing him on turns when I can get the damage through.
Mm-hmm. That's the cool thing about St. Walker is that he's got that consistent defense and he's constantly going to be able to sit there on the field, whereas Guy Gardner kind of wants to punch in a lot more often, and so you maybe lose out a little bit of efficiency there. And since the Lantern Ring is a Green Lantern, you're not really troubled by St. Walker's negative effect at all.
Right, yeah, and he also can't be force attacked if I don't have a Lantern character on the board. That's just like a side benefit, is I can set up my board while I wait. I may take a hit because of it, but it shouldn't be that lethal of a hit.
You say that sitting right across from Wolverine, formerly Weapon 10, but I understand what you're saying.
Formerly Weapon 10 doesn't lethal you. He just punches you so hard that you feel it.
Well, and I'm going to guess that based on your later purchase of that Millennium Rod, were you looking to possibly take that formerly Weapon 10 from him?
No, I was looking to take his Kobold from him and attack with it.
Okay.
Because it would mean I missed my Kobold, and I would thus have a bunch of fists, and by stealing his Kobold, A, it removes the Kobold from the board because he either blocks or attack or lets it through, and B, so the Millennium Rod acts as Kobold removal, and B, it would be one of my fist characters attacking, so it would also trigger the Lantern Ring. So all the Kobolds I missed that turn would trigger off of that Kobold that I stole.
Okay, so you're basically paying them as energy in order to kind of make the most out of a bad situation.
Yeah, so I bought the Millennium Rod because I didn't have another fist character to really buy, and I could have bought Cable, but I hadn't bought enough Jade to really power in Cable's like win attack ability, and admittedly I had a bunch of sidekicks on the board, but there was a point where I had so many sidekicks on the board it was really hard for me to actually get the bolts to trigger the Iceman Global. So I decided to stick with the fists, and by buying the Millennium Rod, it's basically a 6-cost guaranteed fist character because Dylan was always fielding his Kobold. He was always had a fist character on the board for me to steal.
Yeah,
and so it was a reliable guaranteed, I will always have a fist character when I need it if I get the rod out.
Clearly it worked out for you. I was really impressed by this team's performance, and I just want to ask one last question. What do you think was like the real turning point where you took control of this game?
When I re-rolled on turn 2 and got 2 sidekicks and was able to start walling with sidekicks. And
I just love that you can look
at my
back
bag
all the way to the start of the game, and it all comes down to those sidekicks. And I think that's one of the really interesting parts about playing games without PXG is having those sidekick walls be a really important source of churn.
Exactly.
Well, let's head over to Dylan. You played a valiant game, you got some damage in, and you got some pretty big characters playing around, but you never quite swung in for that big hit I was looking for off of Wolverine. What do you think could have allowed you to maybe squeeze in a little bit more damage over the course of the game?
I think a good analogy for this game is I literally brought a knife to a gunfight. I brought Wolverine to a fight against a Green Lantern barrage of Lantern Ring barrage. So I definitely think that maybe my focus should have been a little bit different, neutering his team by taking Jade instead of worrying about his ramp as much. I know there was a couple turns when I grabbed vulnerability and popped it off to clear off a Kobold that was a level 3 because I couldn't clear it with a Wasp. But I think strategically I should have taken that out and hoped that he just didn't reroll that Jade, or if he did, at least make him pay for it because I knew he needed to have that on the field in order to make his St. Walkers viable. That was a tough game.
I was feeling for you, but I really thought that maybe you could get that Black Canary out on a turn when you had Wolverine set up and swing in for like 8, 9, 10, 12 damage no matter what, because having that free field, that's the one great thing about Black Canary is you can play her down and she doesn't need to attack, so you can still get that when attacking alone proc off on Wolverine.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I bought her too late in the game for it to really matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think just like Patrick's team, this is an early stage team that definitely has a lot of changes that need to be made to it because it's really only got the aggressive actor of Wolverine and Black Canary and the control components. You know, with the meta changing, I think more towards action needs a way to counter that. I think you guys hit on it a couple times during what you were talking about Patrick's team. It's just if I don't have the removal to take care of that action die, I'm really up the creek.
Oh, most definitely. I'm sensing a real quick return to the days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Wherein Magic
Magic filled the air. Are you going to quote Led Zeppelin?
Now, if you could take a look at your team, Dylan, right now, and you had to say, okay, if I'm going to replay this, I'm going to take this character off, and I'm going to add this character. What are you seeing? What do you wish you had when you were playing?
I honestly wish I had taken Loki off this team. I don't really feel that I'm already using the combo of Wasp and Vulnerability to really activate that and remove what I need to, and the control component he gives you, I think, is maybe not worth it on this team in terms of the speed I need to get going and really get to my win condition, which is getting Wolverine out, clearing the board, hitting him in the face, and then just controlling his board by keeping things off of it, or at least making him pay for it with Alyssa Drac. And Constantine, really, like I said, in this game, I had a lot of cards that were basically dead to me. Constantine being, he's there for the when fielded, and he doesn't have any when fielded effects, really. And then Wasp is essentially there just for Professor X matchups, so then, I make him pay for using those globals, and on his side, he used a couple globals, but in the end, I didn't feel like it was enough to really make the difference. I don't think he would have questioned, using the Cable Global once, or even using that Iceman Global, since he only has to pay a bolt to yield multiple bolts. So.
Yeah, and you both put the Wasp Global to use a few times, both to your advantage to kind of get some of that targeted removal off. But I think from what we were talking about during the game, the prevalence of the action dice that we expect to see, maybe not Millennium Rods, but that Lantern Ring is something that has to be contested. And if you see it on the other side of the field, you're on a time clock. You've got X amount of moves before, if they set up and they set up well, before that thing just blows up. And if you don't have a way to remove it, we're looking at a quick team that's got to get in and get the job done.
Yeah, the card I was reaching for earlier was Breaker the Magical Warrior. He's that really low-cost Fist character, basically a better stat of Bleeze, and he's going to be able to clear off your opponent's continuous action dice. And I was wondering if people would ever pick up on him as a way to counter out the semi-prevalent Millennium Puzzle, and it never really took off. But with really aggressive and painful persistent continuous action dice like Lantern Ring and Lantern Battery now making their way onto the stage as well, I definitely think there's going to be a spot on most teams for him somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Patrick touched on the latest TPA episode about some different action die removal cards, and Breaker's definitely in that discussion. If you're Warlight drafting, Bleece if you get the rare, is probably a great pickup for you, but when we start looking at constructed play, Breaker's got to get looked at as a good Fist character in there to get the job done as well.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Anything else, Dylan, from your team here?
No, but I look forward to the next match, Shadow.
It's always great to see you two warring back and forth. The title is going to shift over to the left-hand side for today, but I'm sure that we'll see another shift here in the near future.
Yeah, definitely next time, Dylan, I will still stomp you into the ground.
No, there's that humility coming out of our Patrick once again.
Well, thank you all so much for watching. This has been In the Field on the Reserve Pool Network. I hope you'll visit us next time, and as always, have a great day.
Thank you for watching.